I'm completely baffled that you, as a law enforcement officer, would be comfortable with somebody who is mentally deranged and is clearly been identified as such should continue to have a firearm in their possession. Why would you want them to have guns?
Well, I don't think a mentally ill person should have a gun. The problem is that's not what this bill addresses. This bill allows for an ex-spouse, a roommate, basically someone who's defined as a household member, to go in and tell a judge without the other person there to plead their case that that person is a significant risk. Again, that definition is pretty unclear, but a judge could issue that order. A judge isn't a mental health expert, neither is the person making the order. And a person in the United States has a constitutional right to own a gun. And the way that this law is crafted would basically deprive that person of that right with the word of a third party coming in.
Okay, but on the suggestion of a third party, but of course all laws can be abused. But the point of this law was to protect, and it's up to a judge to make that decision. Back in 2017, I mean, you know well why there is a push for this law. A 29-year-old Douglas County Sheriff's deputy was killed, Zach Parrish, by a man with an arsenal of weapons, and authorities said he had a history of bizarre behaviour, including threats to the police. And his boss at the time, Sheriff Tony Spurlock, says, we've got to bring in this bill because it will protect life. If someone's making bizarre threats, if someone's behaviour looks like they're mentally unstable, why should they be in charge of an arsenal of weapons?
They shouldn't. Sheriff Spurlock and I both agree that we should have changed our mental health hold statutes in the state of Colorado. We currently have a provision for taking someone in for involuntary treatment. The problem is the standard under that law is so high that a person very rarely stays inside of a mental health facility, so that they're released in very short order, which is what happened in the incident with Deputy Parrish. If we were to address that law, we would be dealing with the person and not just removing their firearms. In the case of the red flag bill, we could go in and take someone's firearms, but that doesn't mean they're not still a significant risk. They would still have access to knives, to cars, to trucks, to bomb-making materials, whatever they chose to use.
Okay, how many people were murdered with knives in America last year? Do you know?
I have no idea.
You've no idea? Do you know how many people were murdered with guns?
I don't. That's not something that I track daily.
So you've made a judgment call on the relative threat of guns against knives just now without any idea how many people get murdered with either guns or knives in America on an annual basis. I mean, you're a law enforcement, you're a sheriff, and you don't know how many people are relatively killed by guns and knives, but you make statements that he would be, or this person, she, he, would be as dangerous if they didn't have a gun?
It doesn't matter the total number. We're talking about the specific person and their ability to commit evil.
Well, it does.
Again,
here's why it
what's the
matters.
difference in a weapon?
Sheriff, with respect, here's why it matters. So 12,000 people a year. Let me inform you about the murder rates in your own country. 12,000 people a year get killed with guns, murdered with guns, right? 1,500 on average per year are killed by knives or cutting instruments of any description, okay? So 12,000 against 1,500. So clearly, the risk of somebody using a cutting instrument like a knife to murder somebody in America is massively lower than it is if they have a gun. So when you say they're just taking the gun away from somebody who's deranged or unhinged or people are worried about them or they're making bizarre threats or whatever it may be, when you say that that threat remains the same, it doesn't, does it? And if you want to take your truck analogy and your car analogy, how many people, do you know how many people get murdered in America each year with trucks or cars? Do you know that statistic?
No, I don't. And it's irrelevant to this argument.
Well, it's not because you
the argument you just made.
It's the very argument you've just made, which is that the gun is...
Right, I understand
You said the
that.
gun is irrelevant. You said that the gun doesn't count because actually if he didn't have a gun, this person, whoever it may be, male or female, if the deranged person identified and red flagged did not have a gun, they would remain as big a threat with other things they could kill people with. To which I say to you, that argument doesn't work because the threat level from anything else compared to guns in America to be used as a murder weapon is massively lower. So actually taking a gun away from somebody who is mentally unhinged would make a significant difference to the threat of people's lives. And I would also say to you this, in Britain, we have very stringent gun laws, and we have 32 people a year, on average, who get killed with guns.
And you're also talking in the news about knife attacks that are happening on the street.
Sure.
You're just shifting from one weapon to another.
Except that the numbers of people killed by knives in Britain, which is 1/5 of the size of America, is massively, massively lower comparative to the number of people killed by guns in America. And I would say to you, look, you're perfectly entitled to want, to believe in your constitutional Second Amendment rights to own a gun. I get that. It's a very polarizing issue in America. We in England may find it baffling, but it's not our country. But on this particular point, what I find extraordinary is that a sheriff, a law enforcement officer, would be prepared to go to jail rather than implement what seems to be a completely common sense law, which is that if somebody really is concerned about the mental state of someone with a gun, they go to a judge who makes a judgment, and on the basis of that judgment, that gun is removed from the vicinity of that crazy person. I don't get why you would want to go to jail and lose your own liberty rather than protect people from that.
Because our country was founded on that Constitution, and while you may not have an agreement with that Constitution, that's the founding document of the United States. And when I take my oath of office, my oath says that I will first protect the Constitution of the United States, second, the Constitution of the state of Colorado, and third, the laws of Colorado. If a law is written that is in conflict with that Constitution, whether it's the state Constitution or the United States Constitution, that puts me in peril of violating my oath and also violating a constituent's constitutional rights. I understand.
Why don't you quit and do another job then? Because frankly, your job is to protect people in your area, right? That's your job as a sheriff. And your job is to enforce the law.
It is my job.
Your job is not to determine the law or to calculate what the law should be. Your job is to enforce it. You took an oath to do that. And if you're not prepared to enforce the law and stop crazy people having guns and who've been red flagged and a judge thinks is clearly a danger, you don't seem like the right kind of guy to me, with all respect to you, who should be protecting people, because your desire appears to be more about not protecting people.
Well, again, we have obvious opposite opinions of the Second Amendment and how it applies to our country. I have numerous constituents in my county that support my stance. They're proud that I'm standing up for their gun rights. And quite frankly, our Second Amendment was written to keep government in check. And that's the whole reason that I'm protecting those Second Amendment rights, because as a law enforcement officer, I'm the last line of defense to make sure that my constituents can still possess the weapons that they're rightfully entitled to own.
So just to clarify and just to end this debate, you're comfortable with anybody who is red flagged by somebody that knows them or by law enforcement as being potentially insane and has a gun on them. You are comfortable with making sure, personally, that none of those people have their gun taken away. You think that is the best way to protect your people?
That's not at all what I've said. I've said I would use the laws that I have available to me to deal with that person and get them mental health treatment. I'm not going to focus on the gun. I'm going to focus on treating the person. Okay. And I'll still preserve their Second Amendment rights unless mental health proves that they're not in the capacity to own a firearm.
With respect, Sheriff Reams, you've already said the mental health provisions in America are woeful and need substantially strengthening. So until that happens, these crazy people who've been red flagged can continue to have a gun and kill people with them. That's my point.
So the same thing would apply under a red flag order. There's no way that you could ever take someone's firearms away and not have them get possession of some other firearm or some other tool. There are mental health treatments that work.
Why have any laws?
The easy way is not.
Why have any laws? I mean, if that's your argument, if your argument is that whatever law you have, people are going to break them, why have any laws? Why don't you just abandon all laws?
That's not at all my argument. What I'm telling you is we have a... That isn't what I said.
You did.
We have effective ways of dealing with people
you said if you take their gun away,
mental health issues.
If you try and take their gun away using existing laws, they'll just carry on finding another gun. they'll break the law. So what's the point in enforcing the law? Was your argument?
That's not at all what I said. I said there's ways that we can deal with people through mental health treatment. We could strengthen that law. We could do something far better for people than just taking away their firearms. Yes, the red flag law is a step in a direction that a certain agenda wants to go. I don't believe it helps treat mental health issues in persons who need that treatment.
Well, Sheriff Reams, thank you for joining us. I just hope that there are no mentally insane people currently with guns in your area who, before this gets resolved, and because of your resistance to it, go crazy and kill loads of people. We just have to keep our fingers crossed, I guess.